state of affairs.
Right. Well, yeah, on that topic, what is his take on religions and and the various religions and specifically Christianity? Like, does he have a specific take on Christ and the incarnation and the Trinity? Because and also I guess my question would also be like, what he's a perennialist, but like what about the various religions would he see as the higher truth that they express? Like what is their principle of unity? Because if he's seeing as their principle of unity sort of this Platonic view, because when I was talking with Erval, it seems like Erval basically takes that view that Christianity is just one particular understanding of this perennialist philosophy where that is expressed in Plato, and it has to do with everything being there being different levels of being there and ultimately everything returns to the one and everything descends from the one and everything that descends from the one has a lower level of being. So what's is Guénon's view that ultimately it is this notion of a fundamental unifying principle of reality that everything returns to and everything fundamentally is that what he sees as the core of the perennialist truth, I would say, or is it something else? And how does he understand, like, does he have a specific reading of something like the incarnation of Christ and the Trinity? Because fact of the matter is, once you really understand these doctrines and realize the radical nature of what they are putting forth, like the metaphysics, the ontology, the view of reality, which I would, if I had to put a term on it, and it's the term we've been using recently, is communion. It's this understanding of one is not strictly speaking one, and that's how we don't fall into this trap of thinking everything is like a
Yeah.
unity. One is actually three. God is three. So there's multiplicity in the very notion of unity. Um, and unity consists of a full mutual indwelling, a mutual interiority of multiple elements to form one thing, not to the detriment of distinction. As we always say in Orthodox theology, distinction does not entail division. So yeah, so what's Guignol's take on one, the unifying element or principle of the various world religions, and what's his take? How does he account for doctrines which are so radical and so novel, such as the incarnation of Christ and the Trinity?
So I think, yeah, like because Guinan does put this primacy on oneness, I think he would say that like I think he'd have a reading of Christianity, like I was saying before, that's similar to Origin, and
Mhm.
obviously I would disagree with him there. Um, I would also like I think he kind of sees like throughout all of these all the world religions like there's a sort of like return to the again to the one like in
Mhm.
Hinduism there's a lot of different schools of thought. Some of them are much more monistic than others,
Mhm.
and I think he would see and I mean I don't know too much about his view on Hinduism, but I do believe that in Hindu philosophy, there is a belief, a pretty popular belief, that all these gods are actually just a reflection of like the one higher
Yeah.
god, which is um Brahman or something.
Brahman.
I have to,
Brahman.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually, I believe, like a large part of his conversion to Islam was because of the doctrine of the Tawhid, whatever, and of this sort of like unity and oneness of God. So I think he was a little over focused on that aspect, and I think his primordial or rather like he has like so basically his perennialism, which I think was much more explicated by a later thinker, or actually not that much of a later thinker, but a thinker that was around at the same time as Shuan. I think this he has this idea that all the world religions are a reflection of the one universal sort of like Platonic truth,
Mhm.
but these different world religions focus on certain aspects of the one universal truth that the others don't.
Right.
So, for example, he would say that Christianity focuses more on like the personable aspects of the divine, whereas something like Hinduism focuses more on the kind of impersonal and abstract aspects of the divine, and something like Islam focuses more on like the unity of the divine. Now, I would take issue with that because like all of these systems have completely different like metaphysical understandings of what the divine is. So it doesn't like in order to have a in order for different traditions to focus on the same thing, they would have to, I think, agree on what that thing is, and they don't. So
Mhm.
that's where I think he kind of falls short. But now you asked about the incarnation, and I'm not so sure. I know he did have some books on Christian mysticism, that I haven't looked into, but he does have a weird view on Adam and Genesis, and I mean that is involved in Christianity. His view of this is basically that, and I think this comes from his understanding of like Jewish mysticism of
Mhm.
the Kabbalah and all this. He says that Adam like bifurcated into like multiple different atoms, and he gets really schizo at some points. He relates this like he says like Adam was in like what Plato called Atlantis, and like this tradition came down from
Right.
the polar north and then spread into Atlantis and created this red race, which Adam was a part of. So I don't know how he comes to these conclusions,
Right.
but he's got like definitely a wacky understanding of like Genesis and all that.
Well,
But in terms of
when
the
it
incarnate,
comes, sorry, yeah, sorry.
well, in terms of the incarnation, I don't know exactly what he said, but I do think um, maybe Shuan said this, or it might have been him. I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that, and I've heard it in other perennialist circles too, that like they would just believe that like Christ is a representative of a bunch of other
Right.
figures of
Yeah.
divine figures that incarnated, and like there's really nothing special about him.
He's, yeah,
I mean,
basically like an avatar.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's probably similar to Ereval's view, maybe.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, and it's kind of silly because um I think I don't know if you know of C.S. Lewis's Trilemma on the identity of Christ, where if you accept that Christ, if presupposing that the Gospels are a at least a overall general reliable record of the teachings and the preaching and life of Christ, you can either say that Christ was a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord, because he said to be God. Like no
no,
avatar straight up said to be God, but Jesus said that before Abraham was, I am. He clearly identified, like the Gospel of John, even more like, and I was just reading the Gospel of Mark, and I remember like watching Seraphim Hamilton's debate with Shabir Ali, and he was talking about how there's a discontinuity between the earlier Gospels and the Gospel of John on the divine identity of Christ. But I'm reading the Gospel of Mark, and I'm like, how can you? Obviously, when you're reading about Christ's preaching, it's not like it wasn't as because it was like Christ himself says, it's like there's a proper time for the full revelation, right? But even still
hmm
reading the Gospel of Mark, like I couldn't come to the conclusion that he wasn't God. Like just the language he was using, stuff he was described as doing, the if you understand the Old Testament and the references made that are made, and the typology there is pretty clear. So the point of that is just to say that the notion that Christ is just some divine teacher is equivalent to the person C.S. Lewis was describing, like the modern person who's like, yeah, well, I don't think he's God, but he was a good moral teacher. And it's like, well, no, a good moral teacher doesn't claim to literally be God. That's either a liar, a lunatic, or